1. So tonight we're going to be looking at Cardiff, and we're going to be looking at the myths, ghosts, legends. Very little history tonight about Cardiff because there's so many stories about Cardiff. I do know that my counterparts in Llandaff and Cardiff have their own ghost walks, and they usually tell very many stories about Llandaff and the surrounding area. And I don't think I've got a single story that they actually use on their walk, so it's quite useful with giving you information. So there's a Ghost Experience Cymru recording. Our first ghost walk, our first live ghost walk, is actually coming up on Friday, the 14th of August. So we're looking forward to that at UNE. So without further ado, what we need to do is introduce the fact that we're going to be looking at lots of ghost stories tonight, which is absolutely brilliant. With most of the evenings that we've been doing since the beginning of the pandemic, and now we're post-pandemic, it's been that I've found enough ghost stories, but I've had to supplement it with myths, legends, and I've had to supplement it with history. But I do actually have, from the books that I've actually got here, without even looking at the internet once, we've got enough to keep us going for 2 evenings. So we'll do part 1 and part 2 again. So we're actually going to start with this bridge. It's connected with the story in a way. This is known as the old Lequith Bridge over the River Ely. Now, this is what the story is about, the River Ely. And it's about an old man, as these stories go. It's a rather strange story. And it's out of ghost stories that goes, this is probably one of the weirdest. Nobody gets killed, by the way. So the River Ely is in front of us. So this is Old Lequith, and this is where we start. An old man was walking along the road leading from Canton to Lequith, as you did in the old days. Now, I think that this story takes place around 1850 because it mentions the Taff Vale Railway Bridge. This story would have been written down by Mary Trevilian sometime in the 1890s. So there's this old guy walking along from Canton to Lequith when he was joined by a strange-looking companion who either dodged his footsteps or kept beside him persistently. So, you know, you've got those 2 figures in front of us there. This is Lequith Village. And you're thinking, that looks familiar. Fast or slow, the stranger was not to be shaken off. The old man saw imploring glances in the sunken eyes, but not a word was uttered. Now, I've got like sunken eyes, but you know, we're talking about deep sunken eyes of somebody who's quite old, older than the old man himself. So these sunken eyes, not a word was muttered. And we go on. At last, said the old man. At last, he said. I called 9 names at you, but it did no good. He only kept looking at me. And then I got into a rage. Now this is going into his mind. And cursed him, but he didn't say nothing. This man said nothing at me. I called out those 9 names. So obviously he's just giving some names out there to try and connect with the individual. You know, John, you go on a train, you say Dave to everyone. Eventually somebody's going to say Dave back. But anyway, this individual didn't respond. You know, when you're going down the road and there's somebody with you and you want communication, you might say, hello, Dave. How are you today? You might say all these things, but nothing worked. So at last, this old man said, he said, in the name of God, what do you want? You can imagine the conversation with those 2 figures in front of us. What do you want? Obviously, it's not those 2 figures on this image at all, but it sets the scene. And the other figure, with these very deep-looking eyes, the old man said that the other figure, tears started to stream down his face. And then he responded very slowly. It's quite interesting that a ghost is actually responding, speaking back at the old man. I couldn't speak until you asked me in the name of God. I am dead. And I'm sure the old man is thinking, yeah, I bloody realised that. I am dead, but I cannot rest till my head is buried. So you can imagine the old man is thinking, what? Hang on a minute. I'm speaking to you. So what's going on here? You can imagine what's going through this man's head, the old man's head. I was a boatman down the Ely River, and my head is on the bank. So you're thinking, right, okay, that's fair enough. It ties in with lots of stories, doesn't it? You know, we have, you know, the head of the Aberthor Roman ghost, and it needs to be reunited with the body. We've had all these types of things before. And the word is, in God's name. That's familiar from the story with Mark Ross, with the Elizabethan sailor. However, the gentleman then goes on to say, he tells the old man, it's on the bank, and the devils do play with it continually, using it as a football. And you're thinking, this has got to be a bizarre story. So on a bank like this somewhere, if you will come with me and get it from them and bury it, I shall rest. So you're thinking, and the adage is, you must always do what a ghost tells you to do. You must implicitly trust a ghost every single time. You know, it's you always think, right, that's not a good idea, but you've always got to trust a ghost. The ghost needs you more than you need the ghost. In fact, this man didn't need the ghost at all, actually, in any way, shape, or form. Then the old man agreed to go down the riverside in search of the skull. I love the wording here. Go down the riverside, not go to the riverside, but go down the riverside in search of the skull. It was late and the night was dark, so you can imagine, spooky Ely River. Guided by the poor spirit, the man went to a bend of the River Ely, just above the present Taff Vale Railway Bridge. So we're somewhere on this map. This thing is happening. It's somewhere just above the present Taff Vale Railway Bridge. Now I'm not sure whether whether the landscape was moved and so on. Anyway, there was a bluish light when they both got down there, and the old man saw a group of people, as he first thought, playing ball. Instead of which, they were little devils kicking football, like hooray, with the poor man's head. Say, I don't really know what that word like hooray, but there you go. Maybe they're saying hooray. The old man said, I was feared at first, but then I knew what to do. I thought I would go to them praying. So he prayed. He prayed in front of the devils. For I had often engaged in the prayer at Bethel Baptist. So I did, and as I came near to them, they all flew away. Devils with wings, little groks. And I took the poor man's head and buried it in a soft place, digging a hole with my knife. So you can imagine this is like, there's no, the interesting thing about this story, there's no instruction given where the head should be buried, which I find quite strange, actually. But anyway, the old man has collected the skull, and then he's digging a hole with his knife. And the ghost, he stood all the while looking at me. Now, this is quite a strange one. There's a ghost there, and the ghost head is being played with, even though the ghost has got a head. Strange. Until I finished the job, the gentleman still stayed there. And then he did go away like a puff of smoke. And you know, there's one very strange thing. That's the end of the story. There's no buy nor leave, folks. There's no sort of thank you very much, Aunt Fanny, you can have another 10 years life. There's none of that. So I thought there's a very, very strange story. So we can't actually do Cardiff without looking at Llandaff, and we can't do Cardiff without looking at Castle Cork. And we can't do Cardiff without looking at Cardiff Castle. So Cardiff Castle linked with Castle Cork, but we don't do Llandaff yet. So that's where we are. So Cardiff Castle, there it is. Now, I'm looking at this, it's about secret hoards and treasures. But I'm really not sure that this story is it's almost as if this story has got something to do with treasure, but we don't really know what that treasure is. And there's something else involved with this one. There's eagles and Ivor Bach involved, Cardiff Castle, Castle Cork, and a cavern. So you've got it all. And, you know, so we just think about that there. We think about that we've seen Cardiff Castle. We think about that. And this is a rather strange little story. And for those that want to know where that is Ashhole Cave in Devon. But you can imagine limestone. This is the type of cave that this story is associated with. So here we go. Let's do this. In the tradition of lore, i.e. folklore, connected with the castle, Cardiff Castle, or is she referring to Castell Cork, is the story of the great eagles placed there. It is said by Ivor the Little, which is Ivor Bach. Do you know what, right? I saw Ivor the Little and I immediately thought, who the hell are they referring to? And then I realized they're referring to Ivor Bach, because that's what Bach means. To protect a huge iron chest filled with treasure, including precious stones. Now, the reason why I'm saying I'm not exactly sure what treasure this is to do with, because the story of the treasure doesn't come back into this little bit of a story until the very end. So the old story goes that down in a deep subterranean vault at the head of a passage leading to Cardiff Castle, several miles away, there is a vast cavern containing the iron chest of Ivor the Little. To this chest, 3 huge eagles are chained, but with sufficient length of links to permit the giant birds to seek relaxation by returning as far as the vault outside the cave. So you can imagine these birds are flying with these chains connected to them. These eagles, these massive eagles. So imagine that they're chained in this cave and you're thinking, right, what's going to happen next? What happens next is not what you think is going to happen next. So anyway, they're able to fly outside with the chains and they're able to come back. So these fierce birds are described as having dark grey plumage. So obviously like the eagles in front of us, but obviously with dark grey plumage. Their eyes are large and brightly red with a light that flashes like fiendish lightning through the gloom of the cavern. So you can imagine there's these birds that sort of illuminate with their chains on, connected to this chest. In certain seasons of the year, chiefly between October and March, which is going to be the mating season around March, actually, but I don't know if that's got anything to do with it. These birds make fearful commotion in their retreat. So as they've flown outside, as they return, drawing attention to them, they shriek and scream, causing terror to the dwellers in the countryside around the castle. So it's almost as if like one of those dragon stories where you've got to kill a dragon, that type of thing. In ages gone by, men sought to destroy the eagles. So, but when they tried to destroy the eagles, they failed. During the 1600s, a search party armed from head to feet explored the vault and cavern, but were beaten by the birds and gladly made their escape. So obviously they're into this cave and they're running off. So they're petrified of these birds. So we've no idea where this is, but it's 3 miles north of Cardiff Castle. Another party took the precaution to have their weapons blessed by a priest, while a more devout company sought the aid of a holy friar who had never tasted wine or strong drink. I've got to be honest with you, what the hell does that mean? Strong drink. So he obviously drank his ale, but he didn't do his whiskey or his heavy wines like John. but they were treated in the same ferocious manner as former explorers. And you're thinking, this is a very bizarre story. In the 1700s, so we've done the 16, in the 1700s, a party of brave and fearless men who had seen active service abroad started on an expedition to the cavern. So this story of the cavern must have spread far and wide because, you know, at the end of the day, Wales is not really a populous nation at that point. And obviously it's a bit of a backwater. So these people probably served abroad and they heard about this cave and they heard about the treasure. If that's what's in the chest. They were armed with pistols and cutlasses, but although they fired and slashed away for hours inside the cave, how many of these bloody eagles must there have been? The eagles with the great red eyes beat the men unmercifully, so that they were glad to retreat. And as the men left the gloomy vault, the eagles screamed in exultation, while the flapping of their wings sounded like distant thunder. And it's very strange, this story. And then it mentions Castell Coch. It was said that those who cared to seek might find the chained eagles of Ivor the Little, guarding the huge iron chest in the cavern of the Red Castle. The Red Castle, Castell Coch. But to this day, human power has been unable to dislodge them. So a century ago, so a century before Mary Trevelyan, so we're talking about the late 1700s. Now, this is interesting. Aged people declared that their forefathers believed the three gigantic eagles. Now it's three eagles. At 1 minute, it seems like there's loads. Now there's three. Intended guarding their chieftain's treasure until Ivor the Little could come back to his own again with his brave 1,200 men of Glamorgan. These gigantic eagles appear in another story connected with Castell Coch. So there you go. Ivor had 1,200 men in his army. And I thought that was straight because it doesn't actually get to the point. You're just thinking, well, you know, what's happened to that story? And it's disappeared. It's completely disappeared. I've not heard of that before, ever. And it's a story that's completely disappeared. It's a really strange one. And I thought, well, right, to dumb us down a little, we need to go to a strange story. It's very bizarre. Now, I found this story in two books. We've got another book here. Where is it? We've got a book here called Welsh Folk Tales by Peter Stevenson. Any relation, John? And this story that I'm going to read I actually found in this book as well. So it's a very strange story, and it's about frog men and frog women. And you glaze over with thinking, what the hell is this about? Because what we've got the black shooks and stuff throughout the Vale of Glamorgan, but this is a story associated with a frog woman with Cardiff. Toad men and frog women are found in Welsh lore, and of these, the following instances are well authenticated. So I think you've got the Old Grange in Glamorgan. I think that might be referring to Marcross. And there's other localities in the area. But there's, those weren't specific. This is specific to Llandaff. So that's where we're going to go now. So we're in Llandaff. And this is for you, John. This is a frog woman. So we're in Llandaff. There's Llandaff. Okay. And there's the cathedral. And then we go over to a frog woman. Just for you, John. A frog woman was known to frequent the road between Llandaff and Cardiff. So there she is. I don't know if she looked like this. Probably unlikely. Setting the scene. Country people said she was only to be seen on moonlit nights. It was rumoured she belonged to a high family, but had been sent out of the way. So she's been sent out of the way to live with the wife of an agricultural labourer near Llandaff. These are all scenes of Llandaff, by the way. That's the Bishop's Palace, as it's called. So she's sent to live with the wife of an agricultural labourer who was paid for keeping her. This woman had the movements of a frog, and her croak was unmistakable. Eventually, she fell into the River Taff. And for many years afterwards, people believed that about midnight on moonlit nights, the frog woman could be heard croaking and screaming for help to get out of the dark waters. So, very strange little story that to do with Llandaff. And transformations from human to bird or animal shape is accompanied by stories of the transmigration of the soul. I've studied the Mahabharata and various Hindu works, and you just see about the migration of the soul to other human forms or animal forms and so on. So we've got those little stories, and we have some nice other little stories coming up. So here we go. This is from another little book that I've got on the shelf. A book that I've never used at all in the past years, and I've realized I should have actually used this book. So we're going to look at Llandaff now. So the stories that which we've just done are from Folklore and Folk Stories of Wales by Mary Trevelyan and Sydney Hartland. And these stories are from Russell Gascoigne, The Hauntings of Glamorgan and Gwent. And we immediately go to a familiar story, but we need to get the locality. So we've got the backdrop of Llandaff in front of us. Here we go. And we go to the Cow and Snuffers. The Cow and Snuffers is in northern Llandaff. So to give you an idea where we are, let's go back to that map. If we can find the map. Oh, we've just missed it. So what we've got, if you follow the cursor, you've got northern Llandaff, and you've got the River Taff itself flowing, dissecting northern Llandaff from southern Llandaff. And the southern Llandaff, we've got the cathedral and the cemetery, which is quite an eerie locality, actually, the cemetery, particularly at night. I've been on the ghost walks with Cardiff ghosts. They're rather interesting. So it'd be nice to go to so here we go, the Cow and Snuffers. The last time I was in a pub like this, I was a model, but we won't talk about that. So two other ghost stories in Llandaff, both concerning pubs, which can still be found there. Now this one, the Cow and Snuffers, is now closed. It closed in 2010 and is now flats. And Michelle asked me whether it had been knocked down and stuff, and I said, well, let's just remember it for what it looks like. And there's a link here associated with Disraeli as well. The old Prime Minister Disraeli, a friend of Queen Victoria. So the Cow and Snuffers. That said, however, perhaps a story connected with the Cow and Snuffers shouldn't be classified as being a ghost story at all. Tendency to disagree with the writer on that. The subject of ancient Welsh death omens was aired to be the Gracha ribbon at this site. Such an omen, the Gracha ribbon, as we know. A hideous, leatherned, winged hag with matted hair. Not always winged, may I add. Glaring eyes, usually red, and spindly arms. This terrifying creature, similar to the Irish banshee, was said only to appear to those of pure Welsh pedigree. So when I said to Michelle earlier on that sounds a bit like you with Michelle, because it's also got red hair. So that means I'm of high pedigree. There you go. So the story with the cow and snuffers. The Grac Ribbon would then warn of whoever was about to die by shrieking out their name or capturing their soul with the stories I offer. It was just such a creature which is said to have visited the Cow and Snuffers, then known by a different name in 1877, described a horrible old woman with long red hair and a face like chalk and great teeth like tusks. She is said to have entered the inn, then owned in 1877 by the Llewellyn family, through an open window late one night, to then fly wildly around the room, letting out ear-splitting shrieks before leaving again through the window. The following night, at exactly the same time, a member of the Llewellyn family died at the inn. Now we hear that, don't we? Particularly with the heirs of St. Donat's, the last of the Stradlin family in the early 1700s. But then we also hear that with one of the heirs associated with Cardiff Castle. But we've got another pub at Llandaff as well. So Cow and Snuffers as well. It was called the Disraeli for a while. It's the Maltster's Arms. Now the Maltster's Arms is still going actually. And another story associated with Grac Ribbon. Here the story is of a rather more traditional nature. Originally a malt house, the Maltsters is said to have the ghost of a small, dark man wandering the bars at night. We see this with one or two pubs in Cowbridge. In 1965, the landlord, Ken Perrott, reported that he had actually seen the figure of a dark man wandering the bars at night. What's interesting about this story is that whenever we hear about ghosts wandering through pubs, it's inevitably always a woman, strangely enough. So what I'd like to do next is, you can't really do Cardiff without looking at Cardiff Castle. But I've got a little bit of a ditty for you here. So before we do the ditty, let's sort of move on a little bit. You see, you've got Cardiff Castle there. We all know where Cardiff Castle is. The River Taff now changed course. The River Taff used to go down Healer Porth once, if you follow the cursor. But things have changed since. So back to Cardiff Castle. I may, before I do the poetry, mention that we'll do a little bit of history about Cardiff Castle, okay? So here we go. This is that little bit of a ditty. Glamorgan, I pray you now all, great people and small, give ear to my narration. A spectral thing is what I shall sing, the wonder of all the nation. And such a rum ghost is its pride and boast, is beating the boards and the benches. Both old men and boys have heard the noise, and so have a good many wenches. I thought that appropriate. Cardiff with all its pubs. Lots of other places in Glamorgan with lots of pubs as well. So you're seeing this image here. A Roman fort once stood on a site of where Cardiff Castle is now. Part of the castle, however, is really no more than an elaborate folly built during the Victorian era. With Cardiff Castle now, the animals on the right are now gone. And the animals on the left only start a lot further on. So you've got these green banks now, and lots of these animals have been moved. But I fancy to think that this image was taken in about 1890 odd. And actually, there's been lots of additions to this, and you can see all the ivy and everything over that wall. It's great. Anyway, carrying on. Having made his fortune and Cardiff's by exporting coal all over the world from the city's docks, the area around which now bears his name, Bute Town, the second Marquis of Bute instructed that the ruins of the Norman castle be completely restored, but not to the original state, but in a romanticized manner. He never saw his dream realized. In 1848, he collapsed and died in his dressing room at the castle, leaving it to his son to continue and complete the project. In 1861, then the third Marquis of Bute engaged the architect, William Burgess, to fashion the castle into the impressive palace that is to be seen today. Standing in the very centre of the city of Cardiff is crowning Victorian moment. And that's what it looks like today. You mentioned the Roman stuff. So that is the Roman, the lighter stuff on the bottom there is the Roman remains. And let's get the annotation. So hang on, let's get my annotation bar up. Here we go. Those are the Roman remains, and that's the red rada sandstone outlining it. And you could trace the Roman remains all the way around the castle. You can actually see more of it extending over here as well. And all of what we do talk about is sort of in this area and actually a bit further on as well. Engaging the architect William Burgess to fashion the castle into the impressive palace that is to be seen today, standing in the very centre of the city of Cardiff, is crowning Victorian monument. The Bute family left the castle in 1947, and it is now cared for by the city of Cardiff. With its spectacular assemblage of different architectural styles, its lavishly decorated interiors and peacocks strutting and calling in its grounds, it has become a major tourist attraction. And I don't know if it's still true that if you're a resident of Cardiff, you could still get in there. But this is the library. The most well-known ghost story connected with the castle concerns the second Marquis of Bute, the one who died in 1848. His ghost is said to appear through the fireplace in the library. There's the fireplace over there, lovely. Pass through a 6-foot thick wall, cross a corridor, and then make its way through yet another wall to enter the room where he died. Converted after his death and in his memory into a private chapel by his son, the third Marquis of Bute. And I've heard this story when I've been to Cardiff Castle. And it's got all these old, really old books as well. It's probably got the full volume of Mary Trevilian's books as well, somewhere along there. But a beautiful library. Surviving the Blitz on Cardiff as well. Wonderful. Absolute wonderful. And it's good to go on a guided tour. You can either go on a normal guided tour or you can go on a ghost tour of the castle. Moving on a little way away from the library, actually. And also into the banqueting hall is the Grey Lady, who seems to frequent the library and other parts of the castle. There is also a grey lady, I've heard this one a number of times, reputed to haunt the castle, variously described as being a nun-like figure, a faceless vision in flowing greyish white skirts, or simply as a lady in grey. It is she who is thought to be responsible for numerous disturbances which have been reported in the main dining hall and its adjoining anteroom. In the early hours of the morning, heavy doors have apparently opened and closed by themselves, and lights have been repeatedly switched on and off. Remember, one of the guides that I first met there in the 1980s told me that. In addition, footsteps and other strange sounds have been heard there too. In January 1973, the Cardiff Leader, a newspaper that's no longer with us, reported that former custodian Derek Edwards had an Alsatian which he used to take with him on his rounds late at night. The dog, it seems, would often refuse to enter either the banqueting hall or the library. His predecessor, Edward Dunn, said Mr. Edwards had had similar problems. His dog wouldn't enter the library at night either, and would snarl and bristle outside the door. Mr. Edwards added that although he had never actually seen the ghost, he had on one occasion seen a grey form standing at the foot of his bed, which then vanished as soon as he looked at it. So you've not only got a grey lady, you've got all these sort of weird figures that seem to frequent. And I remember hearing that story as well. There are other grey ladies as well, but that grey lady we'll be looking at in the near future. So moving on to another room in the castle as well. This is the banqueting hall. That's not. This is the banqueting hall. In 1984, the custodians at the castle were Gordon and Beryl Gray. In September 1984, the South Wales Echo reported that they too had had some strange experiences there. Beryl Gray said that on two separate occasions, she had seen a grey nun-like figure in the ladies' toilet. In a stockroom near the banqueting hall, she went on, various items would frequently be rearranged by some presence there. She decided that the ghost was that of a maid and christened her Sarah. On one occasion, she felt Sarah tapping her on the shoulder while she was in the stockroom, gathering leaflets, I'm told. On another occasion, she saw her in a mirror. Turning, she found that there was no one there. When she looked back in the mirror, the figure she had seen was there again. A mirror figure. I haven't told one of them at all, actually, but had moved closer to her. On both occasions, she concluded she had told Sarah to go away. Sarah was never seen again. Sarah had duly obliged. So we've actually got one story left now, actually, which is fine. I think that will have been enough tonight, actually. So we'll go on to that. We're going to go to Scotland, Dumfries House. Dumfries House was actually owned by the Bute family until they sold it for £45 million in 2007. And the man who put up the money to buy it and then donate it to the nation was no less than our Prince of Wales himself, Charles. So we need to slap on the back for that one. Finally, to round off this roll call of ghost stories at Cardiff and Cardiff Castle, a phantom coach is said to cross the bridge over the Taff and then enter the castle forecourt. whenever a member of the Bute family is about to die. And interestingly, a similar phenomenon is said to occur at the family's home in Dumfries House in Ayrshire, Scotland. In May 1956, the Empire News carried a story that a David Brecon had reported seeing a coach and 4 on the bridge one winter night. Rather interesting. On the 10th of November 1868, he later learned a trustee at the castle and Mr. Boyle heard the coach arriving at the castle while he was in the library. He asked the butler who it was, only to be told that no coach had arrived, that the forecourt was empty. I can remember hearing this story actually myself. Mr. Boyle insisted, however, that he'd heard the clatter of horses' hooves, the rattle of harnesses, even the sound of the coachman's horn. That evening, Lady Sophia, daughter of the first Marquis of Hastings, second wife of the second Marquis of Bute, and the mother of the third Marquis of Bute, had died. So it's that hearing of the horse and the coach. In 1900, the article concluded, Lady Margaret, the only daughter of the third Marquis of Bute, heard the phantom coach on the eve of her father's death at Dumfries House. And that's why we mentioned Dumfries House. So in other words, whenever a coach and horses is heard, a member of this family will die. So they gave up this house in 2007. It is now with the nation. And just an idea where Dumfries House is. This is Argyll. That's the border of Scotland near Gretna, Carlisle, Dumfries House. And I'm not sure where they live now. So what I'd like to do now, we'll call that a day, and we'll stop the screen sharing. And we'll just, we'll see if there's any questions. Can you bear with me a minute while you get yourselves ready, and I'll be back a moment. Hang on. All right then. Make sure it's small. Back to you guys. Right. Anything you would like to say, John? Keep it positive because this is going out.
Right. We've made a note of the River Ely and Old Leckford. No, Lequith, I do apologise.
Lequith, yeah.
And I've put that on my list to do. So, yeah, we'll go and have a look at that.
Can I just stop you, John? If you go to if you go to the old bit where the cathedral is, you've not only got the Bishop's Palace building, which was a fortified manor for the bishop. You've also got a nice sort of chantry house, which is in ruins from the medieval period. You've got the cathedral. And if you've got a map to work out where the cemetery is for the cathedral cemetery, that's well worth a visit. Don't go there without visiting the cemetery, John, okay?
Roger Dodger, will do.
Anything else you'd like to say, or is that it?
No, I think that's it for now. Thank you, Carl. All very interesting.
Yes.
Here we are.
Thank you. And what about you, Amy?
Great. I knew some stories, some new ones. I haven't actually been to Cardiff Castle, but I knew that Burgess built it and designed the interior and everything.
Good.
Really interesting. I love Llandaff Cathedral and Cemetery. Like you said, there isn't that eerie feeling about it, but I always feel really upset when I'm in the cemetery. I don't know why. It's just one of those feelings that comes up to me. It's like being sad.
Yeah, the Llandaff Cemetery is really sad. Actually, it's just sort of it's a really sad place. You get there's lots of stories about the cemetery, and when Cardiff Ghost Walks actually do their thing there, they spend a lot of time in the cemetery. But with Ghost Experience Wales next Friday, we will no doubt be going down another rabbit warren. So anyone watching this, you can go to www.archaeologycymru.ghost.weebly.com and book for Friday, the 14th of August. If nobody else would like to say anything else, we'll call that a day tonight. We will be doing next week. Next week we'll be doing Barry Island. Hopefully we'll have more people on the Saturday, but I think next week, because Dell and I think maybe Gillian might be joining us on the Friday, so I'm not sure they're going to be doing the Saturday. So that leaves Ellen and Sophie and maybe another person and their cat. So I'm gonna John, did you ever actually buy my Ghosts of Glamorgan book, just to mention it?
No.
You need to get hold of a copy, man. You can I can get you a copy if you want. Okay then. Okay, but what we'll do, we'll call it a night. We'll stop the recording, and if anyone wants a bit of chatter, they can on 3, 2, 1.